Hey, for those in the public, just let you know we're still waiting for a quorum. Thanks.
Save the day, Mayor.
Really?
Yeah.
You may quorum. So with that, welcome everybody to the Transportation Committee meeting, Friday, March 21st, 2025. First, I'd like to ask our interpreter to explain how to access the interpretation services. Please go ahead.
Morning. This is the voice of the interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting scrolls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out the headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Buenos días, aviso por la parte del intérprete. Para hacer el uso de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos. Luego, interpretación. Y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés, en el fondo, por favor, seleccione Mute Original Audio. Silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares para los servicios de interpretación si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión. Favor de pedirles auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and move into the tribal acknowledgement. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. The tribal nations of the San Diego region have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, Degeno, the Swango, Copeño, and the Cahuilla. The land has nourished, healed, and protected and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from the indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. Now, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Francesca, can you please confirm a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum this morning.
And how about going through the remote attendee procedure?
Thank you very much. We do have one remote member this morning, and so I just need to confirm some information with Mayor Pro Tem Bob Patel before we start. Could you please confirm for us that you're able to leave your camera on throughout the course of the meeting?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And is there anybody over the age of 18 in the room with you? And if so, can you please state their relationship to you?
No, not in the room with me.
Wonderful. And then if you could just briefly describe the reason for your remote participation this morning without disclosing any medical information.
Sure, of course. It's for just cause, and it's to be able to tend to a grandparent for their caregiving needs.
Perfect. And that does qualify for remote participation, so we can go ahead and get started.
Thank you. Before we get into the agenda items, I did want to acknowledge it's the first meeting. We have Jim Cousteau here, who is a representative for the East County unincorporated area, and I welcome you and thanks for your participation. I appreciate having your presence here and your ability to contribute. I don't know if you wanted to say hi or if...
Well, we thank you for the appointment of a representative from the Association of Planning Groups, and I look forward to providing input from the perspective of the unincorporated areas in San Diego. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Moving on to item number 1, we'll now do non-agenda public and member comments. For today's meeting, I've asked that each member of the public be allowed 2 minutes. Please do your best to stay on topic and be respectful. We all appreciate it. Francesca, please go ahead with non-agenda public comments.
Thank you, Chair. We have 4 non-agenda public comments. We'll start with Cesar Javier and Purita Javier, and then we'll go to Blair Beekman on Zoom.
Good morning. Ceramics manufacturing and kiln home business known to produce toxicity, airborne contaminants, and poison gases. Fumes other had been operating since 1984 in a residential zone dedicated neighborhood. Councilman Sion Elo Rivera, our District 9 area, dubbed it air pollution, air quality issue, while Councilman Joe LaCava says environmental problem. We are honored to have our mayor and council president to be member representative of the Air Commission Board, San Diego County, giving voice to our primordial community health and safety concern. Our city code enforcement responded to our report of toxicity in June 2021, invoking City Municipal Code Rule 11, which provides exempting ceramics kiln, wood or gas or electric operated, whatever fuel kiln uses, the repetitive motion, hitting of clay with chemicals and metals such as lead,
Thank you. Your
silica.
time has expired. Next will be Cesar Javier, followed by Blair Beekman.
Cesar Javier, our neighbor owner of the ceramics business, won the case, restraining me for 7 years. Sorry, for 3 years. They won the case last 1:30 p.m. with the Judge Sofer supporting the decision of Judge Zip on our motion for reconsideration. I believe that we are shortfall of our effort to pursue. Heavy this time, serious this time, because there is a miscarriage of justice. And this is the unintended consequence as a result of non-support of my city, your city, our county, Ma'am Steve and Sir Anderson know this case from us, consistently attending meetings after meetings at the county air pollution control district, the SANDAG, thank you SANDAG, and this city council meeting under the council presidency of Mr. Lacaba, who is up to this date, haven't even placed it in an information agenda. There was no response since 2021. The police cannot because the owner has a permit. That permit is a fraud as far as our research. Bad, unacceptable. And we believe that the air pollution district also failed to address this because they always assert, oh, it's exempt because of Rule 11. Now it's on the table for workshop. Hopefully they will repeal it because it's a cancerous kind of business. I'm sorry to say this. This is all about what is happening to Tijuana River pollution. Air pollution control.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman, who will be followed by the original draw.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks for the meeting today. I guess the two main subjects I wanted to speak to today at non-agenda public comment is that you're working on the future of the rail corridor issues for the Del Mar area. A real good luck with that. It was spoken at the board of directors meeting last week that that there is definitely a chance the yellow line process, which comes into a steep drop into Del Mar that tries to avoid the Del Mar population as much as possible. It was having a problem in that it was actually going through the lagoon areas, sanctuary areas to a degree that Mario has spoken that he's working on how to move it possibly more northward to come in into Del Mar. I guess I would possibly mean working with the racetrack, and good luck with that. Good luck that can. I think it's really important to work around the lagoon areas as much as humanly possible. Good luck in those efforts and continued. Hi, my mute cut out. My mute cut back in. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. So good luck in in continually working on that issue. I don't know where my mute cut out. I hope my words were heard. I also wanted to comment with 35 seconds, the importance of working with Mexico. It was mentioned at the board of directors meeting last week also that Mexico's current problems with their sewer issues. That was a great report. It was great information. Now, what can we do working together to address these most recent, border pollution issues? It takes all of us to work on it. We can't say that we're so noble and awesome about the whole subject matter. It has to be a two-way conversation. Good luck.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our final speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
Morning, United Nations. SANDAG. Yes, Blair, you were pretty much heard the entire time. I don't think that you really muted. It just you paused for a moment and then you were still there. So you were heard. I don't know if they heard you, but hopefully they were listening. Anyhow, Joel, it looks like you're closer to the food, but that's exciting. That way you can just probably turn your chair around and grab a snack if you need to. Anyway, on a serious note, it was very disturbing yesterday to see a electric bus that had caught on fire, potentially combusting from the fumes. Who knows, right? But we need to be looking into just the dangers of these electric buses or trucks or just even vehicles, knowing that they are combustible from the lithium battery fumes and many things within there. Not only that, they are emitting immense amounts of radiation, but you're actually putting people in harm's way and danger to be encouraging people to ride a bus that's electric that potentially will combust while they're sitting in the back. How cool would that be, right? They can just burn right there. It doesn't make sense to me that we don't acknowledge those things, that we just kind of push this whole type of infrastructure and, whatnot. Even the best batteries, it's like, who cares if those combust? Let's go after the homeless people and take their matches away, right, Joel? That's what's interesting, is that you guys don't ever take responsibility for your complicit and culpable behaviors and agendas that are actually endangering the lives of people and even, animals at that. So you need to be looking into whether or not it is a feasible idea to be continuing to push this type of dangerous infrastructure when it potentially could take.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments.
Thank you. Antoinette, do you have any updates on your end?
I do. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Antoinette Meyer, your planning director. Mario is out, so I'll be covering for him today and providing the agency updates. I too want to welcome Jim, our new advisory member from the Spring Valley Planning Group. We're really glad to have you here on the Transportation Committee. Yesterday, we had representatives from the California State Transportation Agency here in San Diego touring the LoSAN projects and discussing the progress of those projects. And speaking of LoSAN, the rail line will be closed again this weekend, the 22nd, 23rd, for an absolute work window so crews can continue to work on the stabilization of the Del Mar Bluffs. Mario was in Sacramento earlier this week, meeting with the leadership from the other big four MPOs. That's what we call the largest MPOs in the state, the big four. That's SANDAG, SCAG, SACOG, and MTC. We were discussing some of the shared challenges that we're all facing, and this included a discussion of our joint efforts to reform Senate Bill 375 and the GHG VMT targets that CARB sets for our regional plans. SB 375 has been in place for 20 years now, and it's really time to take a fresh look at what's working well and what needs to be fixed so that it is more effective. On a related note, CARB did finally approve our amended 2021 regional plan, so I wanted to share that with all of you. Mario also traveled to Mexico City last week, and he discussed Otay Mesa East with the government of Mexico. And part of that discussion was the idea of setting up a trust fund with some of the revenues collected on the Mexico side to help address environmental issues in the border region, including the Tijuana River Valley. So that's good news. And related to that, as a reminder, SANDAG received a grant to develop a master plan for addressing environmental issues in the border region. And we kicked that project off this week with our project development team. So we'll be coming to this group to provide updates on that as the project progresses. We also kicked off last week the planning for Rapid 483, and that is one of the 6 new Rapid projects that the board approved funding for. This one would start in Temecula, Riverside, serve Escondido and San Marcos. We had great participation in that meeting, and we have a survey that's now open, so we're taking feedback on the route and destinations that people would like that route to connect to. We're also launching a new microtransit pilot in Southeast San Diego in partnership with a community-based group there, Urban Collaborative. This project is funded through a state grant and would serve Mount Hope, Choice View, and the Emerald Hills neighborhoods. And we're seeking community feedback on that project through a survey right now, too, that's open until May 5th. You may have seen the media advisory that went out about Bike Anywhere Day. Registration opened this week for Bike Anywhere Day, which is May 15th this year. You can go to the SANDAG website to register. And of course, we appreciate your support with getting the word out about the registration period and the event. And last but not least, we are cleared to occupy our new space at West, which is great news. Mayor Duncan got to meet with us over there yesterday. The lights were still flashing on and off, so there is still some work to do. But this will be the last Transportation Committee meeting in this space. Starting in April, all of our meetings will be in the new space, and we'll be bringing staff back to the office that first week of April in a phased approach as well. So that concludes the updates. Chair, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Do I have any member comments? Yes, Caltrans.
Hi, Melina Pereira. I am the Acting Deputy District Director for Planning and Local Assistance. Caltrans will be performing maintenance closures on both lanes and ramps on southbound I-5 in the downtown San Diego area this weekend from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. A closure will also happen this weekend on all eastbound State Route 52 lanes from 805 to 163 to continue our work of eliminating the dips to create a smoother ride for drivers. And lastly, the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, CAPTI 2.0, has been released. This action plan, put together in collaboration with CalStar and the CTC, or the California Transportation Commission, showcases strides in curbing transportation emissions and highlights strategies to meet our state goals. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing nobody else, we will then go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. Francesca, do we have any public comments on consent?
Thank you, Chair. We do. First, I will call Cesar Javier to the podium, and then we have 2 additional online comments as well.
Cesar Javier, item 2, 3, and 4. Thank you, SANDAG. Yes, we humbly approve this addendum Sir Jim and Sir Mario, including our classmates, the public inputters here, every time we have meetings, were great patrimony. However, which of these have impact to our programs? Perhaps from the non-agenda inputs. Did the spray hit the bullseye in our planning intent? Item 3, great grant programs. We would desire to learn about what money grants we save. This will indicate the ARASTI, planning on circulation and mobility. This means that have we really achieved the adequate, simple, timely, efficient, and effective planning, which would result to our expectation. And number 4, we are grateful for this plan and programs because this is all about our California Environmental Quality Act, decent home, suitable surroundings. And it's all about the elements of urban planning we call Mother Earth, man, his shelter, our society, which at this present time under repair with the mandate of the administration, stop the education department because it is under
Thank you. Your time has
destruction.
expired.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be the original draw, followed by Blair Beekman.
In your minutes, you're talking about the climate action plan updates and whatnot. And I think you guys really need to start being mindful of how destructive this climate action plan is to the humans that you are pretending to try and, I don't even know, like you don't care about them, you care more about the planet. But we're putting people in danger by pretty much almost everything that you guys are doing in there. Not only like what I was talking about with these electric transportation devices that are lithium bombs, bringing in infrastructure for the lithium battery energy storage systems, when we are putting in roundabouts and taking away lanes, actually impeding people's ability to evacuate in a fire. It's like you're willing to put people in danger of a fire and then make sure that they can't get out if there is one. So, I mean, instead of, worshiping a climate god, maybe you really need to start thinking about the people, making sure that you are not, endangering them by pushing all of this stuff, because you guys don't ever, I mean, it's barely talked about, the fires in a way that would be like, oh my gosh, we shouldn't be using this type of infrastructure. Like if your coffee pot was known to blow up, do you think that you would use it? Like if it was known to combust just from, plugging it in or whatever, would you use it? You probably wouldn't. And you would probably say, we need a recall on this. But instead, we're encouraging, incentivizing people to get in this type of infrastructure and then also just putting it everywhere while being negligent in the fact that you're not even providing a safe evacuation route for the people. And we have seen what has happened in Paradise and the Palisades and things like that. Do we need to have it happen here for you guys?
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our final speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thank you, DRA, for your description of how my previous public comment went. I needed it. Thank you. I wanted to offer for this item, you have a consent calendar item about a master agreement with Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program with Caltrans. I guess, well, to first note, a very much of a thank you to Mario for recent traveling to Mexico City and working on SANDAG issues and issues of San Diego County. It was really nice to hear that. That's how you create a two-way street. Let's hope we can do the same good work from Mexico City. can bring that back and have good conversations with the officials of the Tijuana area as well. And that conversation is open and clear for all of us. Good luck in those efforts as well. So to comment on the Intercity Rail Capital Program, I wanted to quickly comment that it's my hope that with the building of the Lausanne Rail Corridor project issues, I hope we can be clear about all the different rail that is needed for the area. There's passenger, there's freight, there's military. I hope we can separate those things, and that the Lausanne Rail Corridor, to have as light a footprint as possible, can just be for, say, passenger train, and then military transport and freight transport. We can learn to have conversations through, say, the San Bernardino County area and through East County, and use the military, the Bluff area for the military in the future. It's an idea. I hope we can separate the different freight. Oh, there's also high-speed rail that we need to talk about as well, and that those conversations can be separated, and we can parse them out to different areas of the county. I'm hoping. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments on consent.
Thank you. Are there any member comments on consent? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
I'm happy to second the motion.
Moved by Mayor Sanchez, second by Mayor Duncan. Do we need to do both roll call and these today, or are we just doing roll call?
Yes, please. Actually, if we could do both so that we have the voting slide on
Okay,
record,
so
that would be
please
great.
vote using your puck, but we also need to do roll call vote.
For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Mayor Sanchez.
Yes.
For the City of San Diego is absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
For East County, Mayor Pro Tem Mendoza.
Here, or yes?
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Dillard.
Yes.
For North County Coastal, Chair Zito.
Zito, yes.
North County Inland is absent. For North County Transit District, Mayor Pro Tem Bob Patel.
Aye.
The Port of San Diego is absent. And for South County, Mayor Duncan.
Duncan, yes.
Thank you very much. And that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. With that, we will go ahead and move on to the reports. The first report is item number 5, the Transnet Active Transportation Grant Program Project Amendment. I believe Antoinette has a few things to say.
Yeah, while the team's getting situated, I just wanted to make a few clarifying remarks about this. The recommendation in your staff report is ITAC's recommendation. I know there was some confusion about that. It wasn't staff's recommendation. So a few weeks ago, staff, Mr. Frank from Carlsbad and Ben presented this item to ITAC. Staff recommended that ITAC approve and recommend Carlsbad request for a schedule and scope amendment. There's been a lot that was invested into this project, and the amendment would get it shovel ready and ready to compete for other grants to implement. But the ITAC did not want to do another extension since this project has taken quite some time and had a number of other extensions already. So the team today is going to just give you the history of the project, and then you can go ahead and make your own recommendation to the board on how you would like them to proceed.
Thank you, Antoinette.
Clarifying question, no recommendation from staff on this item.
Today, we're just presenting to you what ITAC's recommendation was. We made our recommendation to ITAC, and they did not concur with our recommendation.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Antoinette. Good morning, members of the Transportation Committee. I'm Benjamin Gembler, and I'm here with Tom Frank from the City of Carlsbad to request your consideration of an amendment request by the city regarding their Transnet Active Transportation Grant Program project. The Active Transportation Grant Program, or ATGP, provides funding for local jurisdictions to plan and build facilities that promote multiple travel choices to transit, schools, retail centers, parks, work, and other community gathering places. The program funds planning and capital projects, as well as projects that provide education, encouragement, and awareness programs that support pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. The ATGP is funded by Transnet and has also provided Transportation Development Act funds in prior cycles. SANDAG has held 4 cycles of the ATGP, beginning with cycle 1 in 2010 and concluding with our most recent cycle, cycle 4 in 2018. We've also exchanged state active transportation program or ATP funding with Transnet funding twice since the ATP began in 2014. The cycle numbers and award amounts are shown on the graph on the left side of the slide, demonstrating an overall investment of $29.4 million in the region. The pie chart on the right shows that 81% of the funding, or nearly $24 million, has been awarded to capital projects, while 15%, or approximately $4 million, has been awarded to planning projects, and 4%, or approximately $1 million, has been awarded to education projects. So a total of 88 projects have been awarded funding since the program began. Staff is working on developing the next cycle of the ATGP program, cycle 5, and will be bringing that through the SANDAG working groups this spring for input. The Carlsbad Boulevard and Tamarack Avenue pedestrian improvement project is the only active ATGP project. Now I'll turn it over to Tom to talk a little bit about the project.
All right, thank you, Ben. I'm Tom Frank. I'm the Transportation Director and City Engineer for the City of Carlsbad, and I'll be providing an overview of the project, its history, and the request before you today. Carlsbad Boulevard and Tamarack Avenue Pedestrian Improvement Project is located in the City of Carlsbad along Carlsbad Avenue just north of Agua Hedionda Lagoon. This is a heavily traveled, used area by the people from all over the region, and it's the entrance to the Tamarack State Beach. Project improvements will promote walking, biking, transit use, and enhance safety for all the regional users and improve the area's aesthetics. Notable improvements include the reconfiguration of the intersection of Tamarack Avenue and Carlsbad Boulevard and widening the sidewalks to the maximum extent possible. The next slide is a short video showing the existing conditions of the intersection and highlights the importance of our proposed improvements, especially for walking, biking, and emphasizing safety. And please watch what happens when a light turns red. And all right, thank you. This is currently approved concept showing a roundabout at the intersection of Carlsbad Boulevard and Tamarack Avenue. Based on our studies, this option enhances the safety the most for all of the modes of travel and keeps the traffic flowing, moving along the coast. Staff are currently working to complete the design and the environmental clearance for the project concept. The project agreement was signed on May 9th, 2016, and included a 3-year grant term. In January 2019, the city requested a 36-month extension for the project, citing delays caused by extensive public outreach efforts and revision to the project concepts and preferred alternatives. The amendment was approved by the Transportation Committee in 2019 and extended the grant termination date to May 9th, 2022. In March of 2022, the city requested a second 36-month extension because we evaluated other project alternative, a roundabout, and hired a consultant to provide engineering and environmental services for the project so that the project could begin. The Transportation Committee approved the 36-month amendment in 2022 and extended the grant termination date to May 8th, 2025. In July of 2023, our city council conditionally approved the roundabout option for the intersection and directed staff to return to city council after the completion of the Terramar area coastal improvements, which is just south of this area. And that project also includes a roundabout at Cannon Road, and the city council would like data on how that roundabout is performing to reevaluate if needed before giving the final approval for the construction of this active transportation grant project. Based on city council's direction, we could not begin to get into construction by May of this year, yet staff are fully committed to seeing this project through final design and construction for all the regional-wide benefits. You can find additional information on the project history outlined in our discussion memo. The city is requesting an amendment for the scope, budget, and schedule change. The scope of work change would eliminate the project tasks requiring construction. The budget change requested would redistribute the remaining funds to the remaining project tasks. If approved by the board, the change would allow the city to complete the project's design and environmental clearance and have the project ready for construction for council's direction and possible construction once the construction fund is secured. The schedule amendment request is for a 24-month time extension. This would allow the city sufficient time to complete the design and environmental clearance and permitting for the project. We understand that another extension is not ideal, yet based on the regional-wide benefits for people walking, biking, and driving and taking transit along this regional asset, we believe it's in the best value of this grant to support the next steps of this project. Now I'll return the presentation to Ben to discuss the project performance, and thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, Tom. I'll be discussing use of grant funding, challenges, and other project considerations, followed by a review of options for you to consider and a request for a recommendation. So the project was awarded $1,054,000, and to date, approximately $549,000 has been paid for project expenses incurred. This leaves a budget balance of approximately $505,000 unpaid for the project. The funds remaining also include approximately $20,000 in expenses already incurred by the city that we are processing. The project has run into various challenges. As mentioned earlier, this project will be predicated on the completion and post-construction monitoring of Terramar per council directive. Currently, the majority of the funding for Terramar has been appropriated, with the remaining amount forecasted for Carlsbad's FY27 budget. The anticipated construction completion for the ATGP project at Carlsbad and Tamarack could be anywhere between 6 to 8 years from now. So we've provided 3 options for you as outlined in our discussion memo. Staff worked with the City of Carlsbad to create a request for an amendment and an extension, which resulted in option 1. Option 2 was recommended by the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Commission last month, or ITOC, resulting in the recommendation that you'll see on the next slide. And option 3 is a variation of options 1 and 2, but has challenges as described in the discussion memo. So option 1 from Carlsbad's request would allow current work to be completed and the project to be closed out by May of 2027. Option 2 from the ITOC's recommendation would result in a breach of agreement and return of unused funds, since the project could not be completed on time. And option 3, the alternate option, would hold the city accountable to their original application, but the extension would not be long enough to complete construction. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. I don't know if we want to throw up the recommendation slide for item 5. Yeah, so the Transportation Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors reject the City of Carlsbad's request for a 2-year timeframe extension and a reduced project scope of work for the Active Transportation Grant Program funded Carlsbad Boulevard and Tamarack Avenue Pedestrian Improvement Project. And with that, I will turn it over to the chair for comments and questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Normally I would go straight into public comment, but I will give Member Patel a chance to make a comment here as well, if you would like, Priya.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And just to clarify, I think it was clarified earlier that there wasn't a recommendation from SANDAG staff. So that last slide, I just want to make sure that we're clarifying that was ITOC's recommendation, not SANDAG staff's recommendation.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And just again, for the record, I know that was just mentioned, but that's from ITOC staff. So thank you for allowing me this space, Chair. And I just wanted to briefly say something, and of course would request my fellow board members support on this. The schedule amendment request is for a 24-month time extension, and this change would really allow the city to complete the design and environmental clearance permitting for the project. It would give us sufficient time. And we understand that, I know Tom mentioned this, that an extension isn't necessarily ideal, yet based on the region-wide benefits for people utilizing different modes of transit like walking, biking, driving, or taking public transit, we do think that in the value of this grant, it would help us support the next steps of this project. And so again, I kindly ask for your support and of course, look forward to the questions and comments by my colleagues. Thanks.
Thanks. With that, we will go into public comment. Francesca, do we have any public comment on this?
Chair, we do. I will start with Cesar Javier, and then we will go to the original draw on Zoom. We have 3 total comments on this item.
Cesar Javier, thank you, SANDAG. Great planning. Our concern or curiosity is how mobility and circulation will reconcile with the vital infrastructure Carlsbad engineering marvel we call the very first in our county desalination. By the way, we have to congratulate the city leadership for being able to put up one, which is a vital infrastructure, if only to address many aspects of survivability. Number 1, clean water, adequate clean water. Number 2, adequate firefighting resource we call water. You have seen the huge aircraft getting water from the Pacific, flew it to LA. Now we have that desalination to solve this seasonal fire. This may be a minor input, but I think and I believe we are producing, seeing that niche somehow that we could provide more infra along our coast. You know how to clean the pollution in Tijuana River? Water. Amend the soil. Take that polluted water on the river. Take that polluted ocean water, treat it. And what do we use generally? Water. And perhaps this is a providence on that particular delay, postponement. Why not? Why not SANDAG, the cream of thinkers? Let us not politicize this. Let's have it science-based. Mom Steve, Sir
Thank you.
Anderson.
Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the original draw, followed by Blair Beekman.
This is interesting. I think you guys do is. So what happens if you reject it? I mean, do they just lose money? I mean, if they're not able to start working on it and getting things done, I mean, I don't understand what the rejecting of it will do, force them to do things that they can't. Does it make the whole project go away? I mean, as you're talking about 6 to 8 years, which is everything works at a snail's pace with you guys. Like, you don't mind taking the money right away from the people, but to provide whatever it is, it's like, it's going to be a really long time, which in that, it's like, think about the disruption of that area for 6 to 8 years. And you act like that's going to actually do better. Like, people will probably move out just because of that. It's going to make it impossible for people to get around. Like, if you think it's hard now, imagine when they're doing construction for a roundabout, tearing up the streets and making it so that people have to go on a detour. You can't be here. We got to send you over here. People wouldn't even be able to necessarily walk or bike anywhere either. But it's just, yeah, like, I'm wondering if somebody could answer that, like, what happens in the if it is rejected, where do you go from there? I think it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for it to all totally go away, because I feel like it is going to impede people's ability to get around. No matter how much you sit there and talk about things like it's going to help, it's actually hindering. And you need to be transparent with the people, because this type of infrastructure is not something that we should be spending money on. And just the fact that you were showing, like, a little video of a couple of people going through the light after, just right as it had changed. I mean, that's going to be something that happens. And, it's not like you're saying that there's like a danger or something, but you are putting people in danger by putting this type of infrastructure in place.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our final speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for this item. Thanks for the words of the DRA who, if it could be a better explanation, I mean, the actual project itself should only take about 3 or 4 months maybe to do. I don't think you're going to be leaving it in construction mode for 6 to 8 years, but real good luck on this project. I'm interested in it. To me, this is Vision Zero ideas, but yet it's not. Vision Zero can help facilitate how we have these conversations. That I just think it looks beautiful, actually. To have, this kind of garden area in the middle of an asphalt jungle is just nice. And it's right next to the beach. I think it's really pretty. I think it does a really nice thing. My only question, it's a roundabout circle shape currently. Do you want to consider a bit of an oval shape to it? That could allow a bit more traffic flow possibly and still maintain the garden area that you're trying to create for it. Just a suggestion. I'm just amazed by this. Just to see that we're trying to replace our asphalt jungle highway system is nice, I think. I think it can be helpful for our future and that people will, after a time, enjoy it. Again, the oval ideas maybe can help with traffic flow a bit. But I think overall, good luck in these sort of projects being more often in our communities is my hope. Thank you.
Concludes the public comments.
Okay, thanks. And then just from a procedural point of clarification perspective, my understanding is that the ultimate decision here is made by the board. We're going to make a recommendation. The board will see our recommendation as well as the ITALK recommendation, I would assume. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. With that, are there member comments? Esther?
First of all, was that City of Carlsbad's motion for approval of the extension? Because
I don't have any motions on the table
All right,
right now.
I would like to make the motion then that we actually approve the City of Carlsbad's extension. It is really, really tough getting projects through from the North County. If you look at the status of these projects, most of them are basically south of the 8, and we have so many needs in North County. This is a regional project. This certainly would be helpful to this City of Oceanside is right next to Carlsbad, and many folks use these ways of getting through either walking or biking, especially with e-bikes. So this is very, very critical. So I would be making that motion.
So for clarification, on the motion, so everybody is clear, there were actually 3 options. It'd probably be good to enumerate in that with any modifications. 2 options included extending it. The first option was extending it and changing the scope. The third option was only extending it but not changing the scope. And which one was your motion?
I believe the City of Carlsbad was asking for extending it and changing the scope.
And amending the
correct?
scope, correct, which is option 1 that's on these screens.
My
now.
apologies.
That's your motion there?
Yes.
Okay. And curious if there's a second or if there are other comments. Mayor Duncan had his hand up first.
If procedurally appropriate, I'd like to make a substitute motion for option number 2 to reject the city's requested 24-month extension and scope of work amendment. And I'll give my comments on that. Is that okay?
Sure.
Thank you. My concern on this project, and I agree the North County definitely deserves its share of of projects in support. And in fact, they got this project. This project was not denied. They've had this project. They've had multiple extensions, and I would be fine with another extension if in reality, what was said earlier was actually true, that the City Council of Carlsbad was supporting this project. I see zero commitment in the language here that the City of Carlsbad City Council is supporting this project. What I see is what appears to be a dispute on the City Council, unwilling to say, we will build this. The grant was to build it. Now, after multiple extensions, the council is saying, we will only consider building it after another roundabout, which is not yet begun construction, is built, and then we take into account 5 months of statistics from this unbuilt roundabout before we on council will consider saying, we will build this project. This project was $1 million approximately grant and has already had half the money spent. Without a commitment and the ability to function remotely within the timelines of the grant, I'm not supportive of the project and believe that that $500,000 should come back and be reallocated. If they want to come back for another grant on this project when they're ready to commit to it and use it for construction, then I'd be supportive of it. But that's the basis for my motion.
Can we hear from the city of Carlsbad?
Sorry, yeah, I'll get to that. Are there other people? Ms. Mendoza.
Is this working?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm a big fan of roundabouts, having driven in other countries where they're very, very common because of how they help with the flow of traffic. And from what I've seen of this project, I would be in favor of it. However, I did, in addition, I hear all of your comments and had them written down. I agree with you 100%. And also, I noted that on March 22nd, when the ITALK recommended an extension, the last extension, I guess they warned, or they said that they would find it difficult to grant another extension. So since March of 2022, the city has known that ITALK was not in favor of granting another extension, and it doesn't appear that they have taken any steps to to move forward with the project. So that's another concern of mine. And then the increase, you noted the increase from 1 million something to $10 million. And I don't see where the city has any plans for how they're going to fund that $10 million. So that's kind of a big concern too.
Thanks. At this point, I don't know. if
Sorry,
that makes sense.
I'm going to second Mayor Duncan's substitute motion.
Okay, and just from a
It's not a
matter,
substitute motion. It's-
matter of procedure, I don't think the first motion was ever seconded
Right.
or acknowledged by me. So this is a primary motion right now, correct?
That's correct.
Not
It's a primary
substitute.
motion.
So we have one
May I-
motion on the floor currently, right?
Yes.
Okay, and yes, Member Bat Patel, why don't you go ahead? And if you can address some of the comments, that'd be great.
I was actually trying to second Mayor Sanchez's motion, but since I'm virtual, I was unable to do that until called upon. So it seems like we've moved way ahead. I don't know how that works, but I just have to say I was like literally going to do it right after she made the motion. So it kind of sucks that I'm not in the room, but I just wanted to mention that for the record, that I was trying to second her motion.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that's part of the difficulty of being remote. I would point out, we only have the motion on the floor right now.
I
So
understand.
there is an opportunity to make a substitute motion at this point.
Oh, I apologize. I think there's a substitute motion that's
No.
already been made, right?
Since you didn't, since there was never a second on the first motion that I could acknowledge, because I couldn't see it at that point in time. We only have one motion on the floor, so there's only one motion. There's not a substitute motion.
Got it. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then I would like to make that substitute motion to support the It's option 1 for the city of Carlsbad, and if I could get a second, I would appreciate that. In terms of comments, I'd love for if our transportation director wouldn't mind responding to some of that. And then, of course, I'm happy to respond on behalf of, I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but I can speak for the majority of the electeds. And I am taking my NCTD hat off when I respond because it wouldn't be in support from the NCTD side. But I just wanted to mention, you know, some of the things. So I would say that the majority of our council is definitely supportive of the project, and it is something that we have invested time and effort in. I appreciate Mayor Sanchez's comments because it does take time. And I think that one of the things that we really want to make sure of is that as we're thinking of it as holistically and comprehensively as possible when we're thinking of our transportation corridors throughout our city. We have a sustainable mobility plan in place in our community, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're addressing all of the transportation needs in a manner that meets the goals of the city of Carlsbad, but also connects North County and the region effectively. So I wouldn't necessarily say I want to disagree with the comments that we aren't invested in this particular project. We definitely are, very much so. Our team has been working really hard. It would actually be a knock to our transportation team to say that we actually haven't been investing and pushing this project forward. It's just a matter of trying to get it done with obviously the other priorities that we have throughout our city. So with that, as I said, I make the motion. And then of course, if there are some other specific questions that were asked, I'll let Mr. Frank answer the questions with regards to the timing. So, and I'd love to have a second. Thanks.
Second from Sanchez.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Frank, if you are able to address some of the questions that were raised, specifically maybe focusing in as well of what has been accomplished since the last extension was granted, that could be helpful. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you. So what has been done since the last extension is staff did get a consultant on board. We actually developed several concepts that came down to 2 options, which we brought to our city council, the roundabout option and then a signalized option. And for our projects, what we found in order for them to be truly embraced by the community, we really embrace the public input process. And with that took time, but then we also have our state partners. We have state parks, which we have to work with, and there's been discussions regarding right-of-way and property line issues. And then in addition, they asked us to provide funding for them to do plan checks of our different options. So that coordination took quite a bit of time. And so normally we would want to move these projects at a much quicker pace. It's really the regional coordination with all the different regional partners that takes the time to deliver these projects. So in July of 2023, we brought the item to City Council, a very detailed explanation of everything that's been developed with all of the public input from the community and our regional partners. And Council had quite a deliberation. With that, they really, as you heard, it's conditionally approved to move forward with the roundabout design to the 90% level and then bring back a report to Council on how a roundabout is performing to the south of this project. They just want to make sure that the operations of that roundabout is performing as expected, and wanted to learn if there's anything which we should do different at this location. This location is literally about a mile north of the Cannon Road, Carlsbad Boulevard location. So I, as transportation director and city engineer, think that that's prudent. We can see how the one to the south of this project location that's before you today is performing. We also have a roundabout that's about a mile north of this at the border of Oceanside. So we do have that in regards to performance review. So in short, we wish that we could deliver these projects quicker. We heard comments from the public saying about the impacts while it's under construction. We look to minimize the impacts to the public as much as we can. And we look to be as transparent as possible. So any information regarding the funding or the public input on our evaluations, we disclose to the public, and we welcome their input. So with that, that's committee members, that's our explanation on why, unfortunately, that there's been the delay. And we do believe that bringing this to a construction-ready state will enable us to deliver the project. The city is committed to improving this intersection for active transportation use. It's, as I mentioned, it's the entrance to Tamarack State Beach. It's one of our primary beach access points. It's considered a gateway project. And so the city is committed to improving the area. And then in addition, as Ben had mentioned, the city is planning to fund the project just to the south of this to the tune of $19 million. So we are committed to improving the coastline. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Along those lines, with respect to the construction of this project, has the city set aside any funds yet for the construction, indicating that they are committed to moving forward with it?
We have some allocated funds. We have not appropriated all of the construction funding. And per council policy, per our current procedure, we do that as we bring forward the project to city council for approval of the plans and authorization to bid.
Okay, thanks. And then a question, I guess, of staff not being intimately familiar with the original grant application. Did the original grant application include a delineation between how much of they were applying for construction versus design? Or I don't know if we know that.
Just looking here. According to the scope, looks like we had $1,120,000, 819 on total costs for the construction task within the scope. And design was about $474,000. These have since been amended, of course, in the request. But.
Okay, thanks. Are there other comments or questions at this point? I'll go first with.
Thank you so much.
Montgomery Step.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Is that the extension that is being requested is 24 months, and I've noticed that there also still needs to be go through the Coastal Commission process. In addition, what is concerning to that is concerning to me also the kind of collection of data from the roundabout that is not built yet. And so I'm wondering, with a 2-year extension, what is the timeline of that roundabout being built and then being able to collect a sufficient amount of data that allows the council to make a decision? Because you did mention that it was conditionally approved as well. What exactly does that mean?
Sure. May I respond to that question? Okay. So the conditionally approved, the city council authorized us to move forward with proceeding with the design of the roundabout beyond the 60% to the 90%, including the environmental studies. They did ask us to hold off on bringing it back to them for the approval of the plans until we constructed the roundabout at Cannon Road and Carlsbad Boulevard. And as you
what's
mentioned,
the timeline on that construction and completion?
the construction of that, like you mentioned, we do have to bring these projects through the coastal development process. So that project is targeted for construction in the 2027-28 timeframe. And so to your point, this extension would get our design and environmental studies as far as we can to get construction ready, and then find our funding sources. We are pursuing additional grant opportunities where we can get them. And so it takes a bit to find that sum of money, and we do have other needs in the city. So it's a challenging aspect to find the funding, but we are committed to improving that intersection.
Thank you for that. The project looks amazing, right, from what we've seen conceptually. It is, I really like to regionally support projects that are kind of far along, but I am not seeing the commitment kind of when we dig into the details of it. And I'm concerned that, first of all, 24 months that you all will be unfortunately back here again, asking for another extension. I don't see, based on the conditional approval right now, I don't see the city having the information that they're requesting. And then region-wide, there are also a lot of needs. And so we're just trying to balance all of that and hear the city's request, but balance that. And it just seems like we don't have a strong enough commitment to be able to provide an extension that may not really meet the needs of the city. Yes, Mr. Frank.
If I may, Chair.
Oh.
We are committed to saying that this is our last request for extension, and so
So
this
just one
would.
second, can I make just maybe a clarifying question to you? So my belief is that your request is to, based upon what you've said so far, is to do option one, which will allow you to get to 90% complete design documents. We'll expend the remainder of these funds, and that's where it will be done. Is that correct?
Correct, sir.
So that's different. So, and that's because your option one includes a repurposing of the construction funds into design funds, correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Just for that clarity.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Again, I'm sorry,
Right.
Ms. Sanchez, Mayor Sanchez was up
Thank
first.
you. Thank you very much, Chair. I want to urge my colleagues here that they do understand this is a last request, and City of Carlsbad is, as far as I understand, very much, and I've spoken to a couple of council members, very much dedicated to making this happen. Putting funds together is a difficult thing, especially if you're in North County and you don't seem to be as popular as San Diego. But this is something that is highly critical for the region. They're asking for their, as you indicated, to get through the design phase to construction is yet another step. So, but they definitely want to make this happen. Thank you.
Mayor Duncan.
Thank you. And I hear all the comments. I appreciate them. So if this was a third request for an extension of the grant to function as they committed in the grant application and all the prior grant extensions, then I would be supportive of it. And by that, I mean, this grant was to design and build a project. And they are now proposing to spend the second half of the grant on design, not proposing to construct it by the grant, nor committing that they will construct it ever. Again, there's construction of another roundabout, and the council's explicitly stated, then they have to study data on that roundabout for 5 months. They may well decide not to build this. There's no commitment to build it. The money was allocated to build it. I do believe we are not bound by any subcommittee, or the board will not be bound by this committee's decision. However, I do think, and it's something the CEO has talked about, there should be some weight, at least some weight, given to the recommendations. Made a recommendation, and nothing said today has changed anything, and none of the answers to the questions have added anything to my original comments. There's no specificity on any support that can say we support. It's a great project. It's a great project. I think it would be a great project. I wish they were building it. But when, your question, Chair, of what have you allocated? Well, there's some kind of funds, not really a number. Something will happen. If we do something, if we approve it, then it'll go for bid. Like this money, if we spend this $500,000 on behalf of the taxpayers, I don't even have not even remotely close to a 50-50 belief that this project's going to be built. So I cannot support it. And that was the basis for my motion. I believe on the floor now is a motion to support spending this $500,000 on design and taking away the construction requirement, which was there for the grant and both extensions. So I'll be voting no on that motion. Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that Caltrans supports the city of Carlsbad and the region in efforts to create a more complete streets and prioritizing the safety and options for all modes using the state's active transportation program. Carlsbad's request for a 2-year time extension will allow their work to continue in advancing this project for pedestrians, drivers, bicyclists, and those using public transportation.
Thanks. Any other comments on the board? I'll make a couple comments as well. This one is also for me very challenging because it's a project that I love. It's something that looks very nice. It's also in a city that I like. I very much appreciate the work that Carlsbad does. They've done a lot of good leadership work around active transportation. The things that give me challenges, though, is that I wonder if this is what was before us today, particularly without the commitment from the city, if it would win the grant in a competitive process. And the concept of applying for a grant, extending it out, and again, it's not intentional, but years and years, and then changing the purpose of the grant is a little bit challenging and problematic from my perspective. And I'm doing my best to try to come up with a way to support it in its entirety. And if there wasn't the scope change, if it was just a time extension, I would have a much easier time with that, because again, it's just, we all know what it's been like. I admit my city has been working on improving Loma Santa Fe for 9 years now. And it's quite a challenge getting these types of projects done, particularly in a coastal community where you have to go through the Coastal Commission. But it's very, very complicated when the project changes so much. And then I truly wish there wasn't this, we need to see what's going to happen with this other roundabout before we can. So it makes me think, are we going to do a lot of, are we going to finish the design, spend a lot of design funds, and then have to do notable changes afterwards because of the input from the other roundabout? I have enough faith in Carlsbad that you would move forward with it, but the question is, do you even really know enough at this point to spend those funds appropriately, given that you're waiting on input for an implementation that won't happen until 2027 from another roundabout as part of your decision-making process? And that's very challenging for me. So those are the comments I wanted to put out there. Any other last-minute comments before we go to a vote? Yes, Mr. Frank, if you'd like to respond to something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There is a comment about prior appropriations and the city's commitment regarding funding for this current project. So I looked up what the current appropriations and past appropriations have been on this capital improvement project. And it's about $2.7 million, which the city has committed. So I just wanted to share that with the committee.
And so that's on top of that's inclusive of the 500,000 that you've spent in the grant, or on top of it?
That's correct, Chair, inclusive.
So you've spent about 2.2, and then you've spent another 500 of the grant.
We've allocated an additional 1.7 million.
1.7.
Yeah,
okay,
correct.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. 1.7. Sorry, I got that. Yeah, I guess my final comment is my instinct would be to push towards something reasonable towards option 3, but that's not a motion on the table right now. We have the 2 motions on the table, which we have to work through. Mayor Duncan, did you want to ask?
Thank you. Just a brief comment. So yeah, I've never voted against an extension before. And I guess my point is, I hope that in the future, if this motion doesn't pass, that when they're ready to come back, maybe they can come back for another grant and we could support this project at that time, which would probably, in my opinion, be at least, multiple years from now for that other one to be built. And my other just comment, it seems strange to me, we don't necessarily have to have an answer to it, but I believe it was said that the one that hasn't been built yet is going to cost $19 million, but then the estimate for this one, potentially, 3 years from now, if construction starts, is 10 million. I'm concerned about the 10 million estimate as well. So, anyways, those are my final comments.
They're both big numbers, and they're different intersections, so that I could see. But anyway,
we'll see.
It's not going to, I don't think it'll influence many people's decisions. Tom, did you want to add one last comment?
Yes, Chair. It's in the difference in cost is really relative to the difference in the area that we're improving. So that the Terramar coastal area is about a mile of roadway and intersection improvements. And so the Tamarack project before you today is a smaller area, but it is a very high demand area as far as active transportation use. There's over 4,000 pedestrians a day.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So with that, we do have a motion on the floor. The current motion that's on the floor is the substitute motion, which was made by Member Bat Patel, which was to support option 1. that recommends, it's a recommendation to the board that they get the time extension and the scope modification to the grant. So would you call for the vote?
Thank you, Chair. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Mayor Sanchez.
Yes.
City of San Diego is absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
No.
For East County, Mayor Pro Tem Mendoza. No. For MTS, Vice Mayor Dillard.
No.
For North County Coastal, Chair Zito.
Zito, no.
North County Inland is absent. For North County Transit District, Mayor Pro Tem Bhat Patel.
Aye.
And for, I'm sorry, the Port of San Diego is absent. And for South County, Mayor Duncan.
Duncan, no.
Thank you. And the motion does not pass.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will now move on to the original motion, which was made by Mayor Duncan, which was for option number 2, which was to support ITALC's denial of the request.
For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Mayor Sanchez.
No.
For the City of San Diego, I'm sorry, the City of San Diego is absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
For East County, Mayor Pro Tem Mendoza.
Yes.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Vice Mayor Dillard.
Yes.
North County Coastal, Chair Zito.
Zito, no.
North County Inland is absent. For North County Transit District, Mayor Pro Tem Bhat Patel.
No.
Port of San Diego is absent. And for South County, Mayor Duncan.
Aye.
Good.
That motion does pass with 4 yeses and 3 noes.
Okay. Thanks for taking the time. With that, we will move on to item number 6. Jenny is here to provide funding recommendations on the active transportation program.
Good morning. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. So I am Jenny Russo. I'm the grants program manager here at SANDAG. So I oversee all of our competitive programs. So the active one we're just talking about, this one, and then flex fleets you'll hear about again. So we have a pretty big showing in today's item. I'm really pleased to be here today to give you the funding recommendations for the Regional Active Transportation Program, or the ATP, not to be confused with the program you just heard about, which is the Transnet sort of version of this program. So some background, the ATP is different from other discretionary grant programs that SANDAG has. The program is actually offered by the California Transportation Commission, or the CTC, who sets forth the requirements for the program and the distribution of these funding. So we have to abide by their rules. The program provides funding for projects that encourage active modes of transportation. It also has a strong focus on increasing safety for bicyclists and pedestrians, reducing GHG emissions, and enhancing public health. And it has a very strong focus on ensuring that disadvantaged communities are represented. So it's the only grant program that is offered by the state for active transportation programs. It was created in 2014 to consolidate numerous smaller grant programs that gave out federal and state dollars in active transportation. And in 2017, when Senate Bill 1 was passed, it received a significant bump in the amount of funding that's offered. Also good to note is that this program is significantly oversubscribed every cycle. So you'll hear a lot about efforts that are held to try and increase the amount of funding that's offered throughout this program. So for this cycle, the CTC made $168.7 million in state and federal funding available. Unfortunately, due to the state budget deficit, this amount was a significant reduction from prior cycles. So it's about 400 million less than was originally anticipated to be held. So a significant cut. The funding is distributed through 3 competitive processes that you can see here on this slide, and the ones that are green and blue are applicable to our region. So first is the statewide component, that's the blue section, that distributes 50% of that funding, and all applicants across the state compete equally. Any project that's not selected for funding in the statewide component then recompetes again in either the regional component, which is that green one, or the statewide urban and rural, which is that little pink section that's there. For the larger regions in the state, like SANDAG, 40% of that funding is distributed to the Metropolitan Planning Organization of each region, so each of our MPOs, and then they distribute a portion of that funding within their region, which is what creates this regional component. And so each region receives amount of funding that's determined by population. And so for our region this cycle, we received 6.1 million in funding, which you can imagine is not going to travel very far. So today's presentation is focused just on the regional competition, but I wanted to cover what happened on the statewide side so you're familiar with that. So this is a timeline of what happened through the statewide component. Each cycle takes about 2 years to complete. The process started last year when the CTC developed the guidelines and adopted the fund estimate at their meeting in March. From there, they opened the statewide call for projects, and applications were due in June. In August, when the state budget came out, that's when they issued the revised funding estimate, and they also changed some components of the ATP guidelines to try and help both the statewide side and each of the regions be able to respond to that reduced amount of funding that was available. So in November, the staff recommendations, which are included for you in your report, were released, and then those projects were adopted by the CTC in December. So switching over to the regional side, last May, the board of directors approved the regional call for projects, which included the evaluation criteria and the process, how projects are recommended to receive funding. In June, the CTC approved our call for projects and kind of set, locked in place the procedures that we follow. So our regional call opened in July. This is a supplemental call. So as I mentioned, if you had a project in the statewide component that wasn't selected for funding, it automatically continues down into the regional component, but we offer this supplemental. So if folks have additional projects or if they need to make changes to their application that they did in the statewide, they can do that through the regional component. So in August, again, here's the same blip when the CTC issued the revised funding recommendations or the revised funding estimate. And then in September, our call for projects closed and we received just one additional project for consideration through the regional call. So from September till about February, we went through the evaluation process, screening our projects and evaluating, and we're back here today seeking your recommendation to the board to approve the funding recommendations. If the board does approve those, it will be brought forth to the CTC and they would adopt those funding recommendations at their June meeting, and projects could start as soon as July if they're ready to start allocating. So what's important to note, sometimes we get some confusion on this, is there are different results from what you see in the statewide component and the regional component. And the reason for that is they are two separate competitive processes. So you have different criteria that's used in the two cycles, and you also have different evaluation committee members. So for the statewide, it's folks all across the state that are reviewing and scoring applications. It's usually opposite regions, so folks in the south evaluate the north and vice versa. But for our regional call, it's set up by folks that are all here in the region, wearing the regional hat and kind of knowing how our projects are and what the need is. So you're always going to see different results in the regional component than you do on the statewide. So if you're looking at the two and you're wondering, well, why did a project score a certain way on that one versus on this one? That's the reason why. So to kind of help illustrate that, this slide shows you the differences in the criteria. Largely, they're the same, with the exception of the ones that I've kind of put here in pink font for you. Those are the ones that are different. for that particular component. They are added on. And you'll also notice that the number of points or the weighting is very different between the two criteria, which helps kind of illustrate why those results are different. So when we do our evaluation, we assemble a multidisciplinary advisory group to review our applications. CTC does have specific requirements of what those evaluation committee members' experience needs to be. So that's what's shown here on the slide to kind of help with leveraging out scores so things kind of even themselves out. We had 7 evaluators this cycle, just to make sure that if we had somebody that saw things a little bit differently, it didn't overly shift that average evaluation score that you are seeing. So the recommended projects, you can see them here on this slide in green, those 3 little dots that's there. As I mentioned, with 6 million, that's a really small amount of funding to be able to contribute to these projects. If you looked on the attachment where the funding recommendations are, you may have noticed projects have grown in size, as we know. So a lot of the challenges that happened through trying to fund the projects down this list was due to the large amount of funding that folks asked and the restrictions that the CTC has that we can only fund fully fund a specific phase. So a project that asks for construction dollars, they have to be able to show that the project is fully funded. So as you may have seen, there's some blue sections on those funding recommendations where we kind of had to skip through projects because there just isn't enough funding to be able to make those projects ready to go. So the projects shown here in orange, these are our prior cycles of both the statewide and the regional component. So we do have really broad distribution of funding throughout the region. And I imagine we would see something similar in the future cycles when that funding does get restored back into the program. So my contact information is here on this slide. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the process or the projects that are recommended for funding. And with that, I'll turn things back over to the chair.
Thank you, Jenny. Why don't we first go to public comment? Francesca?
Thank you. First will be Cesar Javier, and Cesar will be followed by the original draw.
Thank you, SANDAG. Planning, design, and construction on circulation infrastructure had practically been casted, molded, less movement or less changes. What's variable looks funding money, which is dependent critically on time, state, and condition, such as the statewide competition. I really agree with that finding, and I also tell you my observation. Some kind of assigned leadership failure, particularly on our core city, the city of San Diego, as was experienced from your inputs. Where are they? They are not even represented here. Mr. Rivera, I think he was kicked out already. Ma'am Wilport, the chair of the safety committee, is also absent. I'm sorry, Sandar, but I am here to confirm that this is a failure in our political leadership, assigned leadership. We have discussed this, and this is one of the pillars that is broken, if only to realize, actualize, implement what we have been discussing into reality. This is our failure, SANDAG. Others are working hard, thinking hard, acting hard, fast enough, but the rest are just dead load, we call it in engineering. We have to carry the brunt, and we have to go on, if only to see to it that the money that is evasive on our hands is really.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our final speaker on this item will be the original draw. You can go ahead. Sorry about that. You can go ahead now.
Okay. As we're talking about funding for active transportation, you know, you always talk about your environmental reviews and, you know, how this is going to impact the environment. But as we're set to get people out of their cars and have them walking and biking and taking public transit, I don't really hear you guys doing any kind of studies on the impacts of safety as far as, like I'm saying, how are people going to evacuate in a situation when people don't have cars? You want them to take public transit or walk or bike. What are you doing to figure out a plan of like what an evacuation looks like when that's all put into place? Because we can spend all the money to, you know, reduce greenhouse gases and vehicle miles traveled and all of these things, but it'll get to a certain point when people are going to need to evacuate, whether it's along the coast because of some kind of a storm, you know, because of cloud seeding and other things that are happening that nobody wants to acknowledge, or fires due to whether it's the infrastructure that you guys are implementing through lithium batteries, the BESS, or directed energy weapons, or so many things that can be a cause for a fire. But how are people supposed to get out if you're expecting them to walk and bike and even take public transit? I mean, is there going to be enough of that? Like, would people be able to actually leave when this comes down the pipe into full fruition? I mean, I hear you more concerned about the climate and, you know, your climate action plan and your climate God and the environment than you really do about the people and their lives and their ability to make sure that they can get out in a situation that they're not expecting. So I think it would be show the public that you actually care about them over the environment if you did some kind of study like that to make sure that this money is being spent wisely.
Your time has expired. That concludes the public comment.
Thank you. Member comments or questions? I guess I'll ask a quick question, which perhaps I should already know, but what was the $682 million that you had on slide 3, which was the regional allocation? What did that represent?
Oops, it's the total amount.
Across all cycles?
Correct.
Okay.
So these, oh, sorry, the 682. So that's what all of the MPOs have to distribute out. And then our, you know, kind of.
Yeah, I'm just
slice of
wondering
that.
how we go from 682 to 6, given that we have 10% of the state's population. So if it's being divvied by population, I was just curious.
Why we got 6.1.
Why we're at 6.1 as opposed to 68 million? Because we have 10% of the state's population in this region. Any thoughts?
I think it's off. Yeah.
Okay.
I see what you're mentioning.
Okay. We can come back to that at some point, but at some point I'd be interested in the answer to that question in the future. Mayor Sanchez.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that there was outreach to our staff at City of Oceanside for our application again for the Coastal Rail Trail. As you know, this is the last segment of the Coastal Rail Trail that runs through Oceanside. And no North County projects were recommended for approval again. So I do feel like there needs to be a more equitable way that these funds are distributed within the county. We have been trying to, in Oceanside, we have been trying to complete the Coastal Rail Trail as well. And it is also a safe routes to school route. In 2015, we had 12-year-old Logan Lipton killed riding his bike to school on Coast Highway. There is just no other way for kids to get to school in South O. It's really extremely dangerous to ride your bike. He was riding on the sidewalk the wrong way, unfortunately, but it was then, that was 2015, and we've been trying since then to try to finish this. Again, I do believe that other jurisdictions, other cities along the North Coastal Rail Trail did receive funding from SANDAG to complete this. And if this was to be funded, it would be finally the end of that regional project. So we're going to continue to try to apply for these funds. But it's difficult when just being in North County is probably points you don't get to have. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Sanchez. Any other comments, questions?
I just wanted to move the, it's just a
Move staff
staff
recommendation.
recommendation. for
Okay, do I have a
the
second?
projects.
I'm happy to second it. May I make
Okay.
a comment?
Sure, go ahead, Mayor Duncan.
So I do think the Oceanside, rail to trail project is an outstanding project and definitely needs to be finished. I'm wondering, and I apologize if I missed it, if it was said, I've been reading all the materials twice now. Is there specifically a reason why that project doesn't get funded? Does it not meet a criteria or something? Because that project, finishing that project would be excellent for the region.
So for this cycle, it had to do with the amount of funding that they requested. There isn't enough funding for it. And if I want to grant somebody a partial, they have to contribute the rest of it to make that project whole. So all of those blue marks that are kind of shown on here went through each city and said, here's what I have for you. Do you have the rest of it to contribute to accept that grant? They have to be able to show it to receive it. And most of these, we know nobody's going to have $10 million to put on a project. That's why they're seeking funding. So it results in this process of coming down. And unfortunately, it's because the size of projects has grown. And because, like I said, the program lost $400 million that was supposed to be in here. That's why there's all this advocacy to restore it. Last cycle, when we did this, we had 65 million to give out. So it probably would have been funded along with several on this list. That's really all it comes down to, is those two constrictions, not having enough funding to fund projects and that you have to fund the phase. All of the ones in this sort of middle were all asking for construction and there just wasn't enough money to provide to them.
I understand those comments and I appreciate that edification for me. Obviously, hopefully there's another way at some point we can figure out to get this project through. Thank you.
Thanks. Go ahead, Jim.
As a representative from the Association of Planning Groups, we represent about 600,000 residents in the county. When you collectively add up all the population of our various planning groups, it appears there are no projects in the unincorporated area. I could be wrong. I'm new to this, but I'm curious if any projects were proposed initially from the unincorporated area, and if they were, why they did not receive further consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's 3 projects from the county. They're all sort of clustered toward the bottom of this list. And it's really based on the project location and the improvements that they're requesting to have made and the way the criteria is structured that was approved by the board. They just don't score very highly. But the county did put together 3 projects. 2 of them were in North County, and the other one was sort of in the central part of the county.
Thanks. Yeah, and to the point of the challenges with the funding, it does look like there were 6 cities that were approached and couldn't get it done. And I have to applaud Chula Vista for being able to figure out how to get a $2.5 million project done with a $266,000 grant. So kudos to them. We certainly weren't able to do it in Solana Beach. And so in that sense, I guess they deserve that project. Oh, yes, go ahead, Eric.
I got a quick question. Is any of the projects tribal projects?
They're not located on tribes, no. We have had tribal projects in the past. We've had 2 of them that have been very successful.
Okay, I don't see Ms. Bat Patel up on my screen anymore, so I don't know if she's waving at me or anything, but if there's a way to Member Bat Patel, did you have any comments before I call for the vote?
I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Sure, thanks. With that, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. Recommend staff recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Mayor Sanchez.
No.
The City of San Diego is absent. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
For East County, Mayor Pro Tem Mendoza.
Yes.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Vice Mayor Dillard.
Yes.
For North County Coastal, Chair Zito.
Zito, yes.
North County Inland is absent. For North County Transit District, Mayor Pro Tem Bob Patel.
Aye.
The Port of San Diego is absent, and for South County, Mayor Duncan.
Duncan, I.
Thank you. Mayor Sanchez, could you try your clicker again for us,
Yeah.
please? That motion does pass with 6 yeses and 1 no.
Thank you. Thanks again, Jenny. Moving on to item number 7, Jenny and Emily are here to get feedback on upcoming Flexible Fleets pilot program, but I believe I will hand this off to Antoinette to introduce it.
Yep, thank you. So we're excited to bring this item to you for input today. Back in 2023, the board approved a budget amendment that allocated a relatively small amount of funding for flexible fleet projects. And flexible fleets are something that have become quite popular in our region. We have a handful of pilots around the region. We've been doing a lot of outreach over the last year to develop this competitive program with those funds. We've worked with the Mobility Working Group, Sustainable Communities Working Group. We have a task force around flexible fleets. And so the program criteria that we're presenting to you today for feedback was really based on all of that input. But this is preliminary. We want to hear from you, and then we will go back and incorporate the feedback so we can come back to you next month, hopefully with a final proposed call for projects and request that you recommend that to the board. So we'd originally designed this program to support new pilots since there has been so much interest in the region for pilot projects, but we understand continuity of existing projects is also really important. So that's something we've been hearing from the working groups, that they'd like the funding to also be eligible for continuing existing services. But we'll hear from you all today, and then hopefully we will be able to announce the call for projects this summer.
All right, thank you, Antoinette. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us here today. My name is Emily Doss. I'm a regional planner on SANDAG's mobility planning team, and I'm joined here again with Jenny Russo, our grants program manager, to share about our flexible fleet program. So today, like Antoinette mentioned, we're here to seek your feedback on the call for projects documents, including the eligibility, scoring criteria, and the performance metrics. So since it's been since June, since Flexible Fleets has been presented to the Transportation Committee, and I know that some of you are new to the Transportation Committee, I wanted to start with an overview of what Flexible Fleets are. So Flexible Fleets is SANDAG's shared mobility program. They're on-demand transportation services that can be used to help people reach local destinations or connect to high-speed transit. Flexible fleet categories include micromobility, which are small, low-speed vehicles such as e-scooters, e-bikes, often referred to as scooter share or bike share. Neighborhood electric vehicle shuttles are a type of microtransit service. They are lower speed electric shuttles used for short trips, typically up to 3 miles, and they operate on a fixed route or an on-demand route. Car share is a service that allows people to rent a car for a short period of time, often by the hour. Think Zipcar, for example. Rideshare is carpool, vanpool, and pooled ride-hailing services such as Lyft shared or organized vanpool programs. And lastly, microtransit is multi-passenger vehicles that can carry 5 to 15 passengers and provide rides within a defined service area. These services are typically reserved through a mobile app, on demand, and through a call center for those riders without access to a smartphone. I'd like to mention our grant program goal. This program is intended to fund projects that expand shared mobility travel choices, enhance transit connections, and fill transit gaps, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. The program will provide initial funding to seed the projects that can serve as models for the region and sustain operations following the expiration of the grant. We received feedback from several 2024 presentations on what is important for flexible fleets generally and how SANDAG should evaluate project proposals. We saw common themes around the need for financial sustainability, integration with transit, engagement and equity, informed operations planning, and we're hoping that these pilots will continue to influence travel behavior and help us meet our greenhouse gas emission targets throughout the region. Based on feedback received from the Flexible Fleet Task Force, which is a subgroup of SANDAG's Mobility Working Group, which reports to the Transportation Committee, based on feedback that we received in 2024, eligible applicants in the draft call for projects include federal, state, and local government agencies, tribal governments, transit operators, and military institutions. There will be 2 eligible grant types as shown on this slide, operations and capital. The program was developed to fund, pilot, and test new programs with various service types and service zones. There is a lot of demand for these services throughout the region, as Antoinette mentioned. Over the past several years, local agencies have launched over a dozen NEV shuttle and microtransit programs across the county. Additionally, the 2025 regional plan draft transportation network includes 36 NEV shuttle and microtransit zones, and SANDAG's 2022 flexible fleet strategic plan identifies 15 opportunity areas. The draft call for project proposes programs that have been previously funded by SANDAG are not eligible for funding. The draft call also proposes that existing programs that are currently operating or have previously operated are not eligible unless there is a service area expansion to the existing zone. This allows piloting flexible fleet programs in new communities. We heard feedback from SANDAG's working groups on the specific eligibility criteria, which I'll cover later in the presentation. Next, eligible activities would include service operations, vehicle purchases, software, hardware purchases, and more, as you can see on the screen above. And lastly, all services must be within San Diego County. And now I'll pass it over to Jenny to talk about funding.
So last year, the Board of Directors made a one-time allocation of our Regional Surface Transportation Program, or RSTP funding, to be used in this pilot grant program. So the program will offer $4.5 million in funding to our eligible applicants, expected to last about a 3-year period, and the maximum awarded amount would be $1 million. Applicants, because this is federal funding, applicants would have to provide a match from non-federal sources of 11.47%. And we also will have the typical federal provisions that come with a program that's federally funded. So things like non-discrimination, Title VI program, and ADA accessibility. And we would offer training to our applicants so that they understand kind of what those things are and what's required if they're not used to having a program or operating a service that has those requirements. In terms of timeline, so as Emily and Antoinette mentioned, we've been coming through our working groups, seeking feedback. Today, we're here before you looking for your input on the eligibility, the evaluation criteria, and the performance metrics. We're going to gather all of this feedback together, take it back for consideration, and then bring forth the final version of the call for projects back to this committee next month for your consideration, and then take it to the Board of Directors and ask for their approval so we can release the call for projects. Pending all of that kind of goes as scheduled, the call for projects would open in July. We would have our standard 90-day application window. So applications would open in July, and applications would be due in September. So in the September-October timeframe, we would review all of those applications and kind of go through the process I mentioned earlier, and then bring back the funding recommendations to this committee in September for recommendation to the board. Pending all of that going as scheduled, in November, we would enter into our grant agreements with our selected applicants, and then those services would begin. And we anticipate the service would last somewhere between 2026 and 2029, but that would depend on the applicant and sort of their plan for service and how far they think that funding would continue. So the draft evaluation criteria are included in attachment 1, so you can see all of the details. Shown on this slide is just a high-level summary of those criteria. Regarding the integration with transit criteria, it's important to note, we had some feedback on this from our working group. It's going to measure whether a service area includes transit, or for our rural regions, if it's covering an area that transit doesn't serve, so our transit desert. So both of those are going to be weighted equally. One isn't preferred over the other. So as I mentioned, we're looking for your feedback on that criteria today, anything considering the weights, if you think there's some clarification that needs to be made to it, or if you just have questions for us. So the scores that applicants receive in each of these criteria are going to be used to determine that order of application. So it's really important that you take a look at this and let us know. This is what's going to set that competitive process that we move forward. And lastly, we are proposing to fund projects in descending score order, but we're looking for input from you if you want to have a regional balance or a geographic spread of that funding. That's something we could also put into the program if you're interested. So performance metrics, all of our grant programs have performance metrics. So our grantees report to us quarterly what's happening on their project, and they also provide data. So there's a list of performance metrics for you in attachment 2 that has a lot of detail. Basically, they're summed into these 4 categories that you're seeing here. So measuring the productivity of the service, the transit connections or shared rides, how are we addressing the community input and equity, so accessibility of that service so that everyone can use it equally, and also looking at things like cost effectiveness of the trip. And I'll turn it back over to Emily.
Great, thank you. So as we have mentioned, this presentation today is our last presentation gathering feedback on the draft call for projects. We have been to 5 working groups over the last several months and collected feedback from all the groups to reference when revising these draft documents. The groups were presented with the same version of the call for projects, eligibility criteria, and documents that you have before you today. And then after today's meeting, staff will revise the documents per the feedback from the working groups and you all. So here on the screen, you'll see a summary of what we've heard so far from all of the groups. Firstly, we have heard a desire to expand the eligible services to allow existing projects previously funded by SANDAG or other sources. That includes services that are currently operating or previously operated. Next, we heard that in general, additional funding needs to be made available for flexible fleet services, including long-term sustainable funding to ensure the services are dependable for the public and pilot programs can be made permanent. We were also asked to provide more points for projects that provide services to transit deserts and military bases. Jenny touched on this earlier. This was always the intention behind the integration with transit criteria, but we'll make sure to clarify this when we revise the documents. Next, we heard support for services in rural areas where transit is unavailable. We were asked to better clarify the equity and accessibility criteria so all community members have access to the service. Next, we were asked to require applicants to identify robust engagement plans and tactics to meet community needs. We heard a strong desire for effective engagement, which could include partnering with community organizations. Lastly, we heard to encourage projects that are collaborative efforts among multiple agencies. And not shown here on the screen, our final presentation, our final working group presentation was to the Sustainable Communities Working Group yesterday. The group provided some really good feedback and we were unable to update the slides in time to include their feedback for TC. But I'd like to mention that the group echoed many of the same sentiments as the Mobility Working Group, including the first, third, and last bullet on this slide. We also heard a need for funding for planning, not just operations and capital. While SANDAG has resources available like the Flexible Fleet Implementation Strategic Plan that I mentioned earlier, and the regional plan, some agencies may need to conduct additional analysis to identify the best suited mode and service model for their community. And then lastly, from the Sustainable Communities Working Group, we heard a desire for prioritizing projects connecting to employment centers. So with that, here's our contact information. We're really excited to hear your feedback on this brand new grant program. As a reminder, this is still in draft form and we will revise the documents and return to you all in April seeking recommendation to board for approval. Thank you for your time today, and we're looking forward to hearing from you all, and I'll pass it back to the chair.
Thank you, Emily and Jenny. I know, Ms. Patel, you have to leave soon. Did you have any questions or comments you wanted to make before you left?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, with that, we'll go on to public comment first. Francesca.
Thank you. We have 2 public comments on this item. First will be Cesar Javier, followed by the original draw.
Thank you, Sandag. Cesar Javier, we are excited. Thank you for the presentation. It's great. Logical program. Curious, however, this is more of land mobility heavy project. Curiosity, what about water, sea, fleet? What about air fleet? As we experience now, the product of modern technology, you see, packages are being delivered now, house to house, by this technology. Why not consider air fleet too? We have also to engage with the community for education, for this continuing urbanization. Why not think of walk fleet too as part of our program? It's healthy. Our neighborhood community looks like good for walking. Or perhaps allowing workers, perhaps at a certain period of the week, stay at home and work. So the mother could take care of the children. These are all my imagination, which may click with our thinking. And this is, I believe, the reason for SANDAG being. I miss our CEO. I will be missing you, Chair. And the other chair from Coronado. Oh, the other guy. And thank you. When I see the Coronado mayor, I am inspired really because of that energy in
Thank
the
you. Your time has
intelligence.
expired.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
All we need is another, invisible killer dot pandemic, and then you guys will get your reduction in greenhouse gases and people going to work and all of that, like Cesar is talking about. Yeah, it's interesting because, we pay for these things and then we have to pay to use them, just like we pay for the roads and then we're going to have to be paying tolls to use them. I'm wondering if like somebody's riding public transit, if it's going to be like $100 just to ride it because you got to pay for, the tolls and whatnot, or is that going to be free? Who knows? But I'm wondering, what kind of radiation studies you're doing for these lithium battery ran devices or infrastructure. I don't think that we're looking into that, and they emit amounts of it, which could get you your next pandemic because it's like having the flu makes you feel like that. So as long as we keep putting in this infrastructure, just like as technology continues to be implemented, there's different illnesses that come forward that we pretend are something else, and then we tell people to take a bioweapon. But yeah, I think that, I don't think we should be using any of this electric infrastructure because it is detrimental to not only the environment, but people just in general. But you should be having some kind of program to help the homeless. Like, at the tent cities, there's these little shuttle things that come, but they are only there for a certain period of time. And it actually, when they're not there, it impedes the people's ability to be able to get out and do what they need to do to get to different appointments or go get food or whatever it is. So perhaps a program to further their lives and help them to get around to places that they need to so that they can start changing things. But I don't know, that's a business. So why would we want to help that go away? So that probably will never happen, but you definitely need to look into the radiation.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you. Jim, I think I saw you raise your hand earlier if you had a question.
Yeah, I was kind of curious, the composition of the working group. in terms of who the participants were? Was there good participation from the unincorporated areas in the county?
So we did hear from the county some good feedback at the mobility working group, which was last week, and that is in alignment with the revisions that we'll be making to the transit integration criteria and serving transit deserts and rural areas. Additionally, our Deputy Director of Planning updated the wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
So our working groups are made up with staff from all of our member agencies, and the county is represented.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Ms. Mendoza.
So I had a couple questions about the suggestions from the working group. And I think number one was expanding to
Yeah, sorry, could we put that list back up on the screen? Thanks. Go ahead, Jennifer.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I approve with that. I agree with that feedback as well. And I was just wondering, what was the reasoning behind originally just restricting it to new or new route expansions?
A couple of reasons. One is there have been so much interest across the region in starting flexible fleet pilots. So we wanted to have more opportunities for different jurisdictions to implement projects. We also, in the first 10 years of the regional plan, have over 30 of these. And so we were trying to just seed some additional pilot projects. And then the funding source that we're using is not funding that can be used for ongoing operations. It's intended to be used for pilot projects, but there isn't a lot of guidance around the length of a pilot project. And I think many of the existing services are still pretty new and could qualify if we wanted to go that route of including existing services and services previously funded by SANDAG. So that's totally an option.
Okay.
But the logic behind, making it new was to just get more in different communities up and running.
Okay, yeah, you completely answered my question, because I was worried that maybe doing it the way you've proposed is going to restrict too much, but you've explained that there's lots of interest in this. And then the other one was suggestion, refine criteria number 4, so all populations have equal representation. And is there any way, I was just thinking, our city recently decided to take the remaining ARPA funds that we had and use them to fix the worst streets in our city. And to make it, even though our city is very small, we didn't want to concentrate it all in one area. So we sort of did a quadrant in the city and tried to allocate an equal amount in each quadrant. Is there any way that we could maybe do that with the County of San Diego? To just more equitably allocate how not using like my exact
But geographic distribution.
yes.
That could be included in the criteria. It's not
Okay.
currently, but.
So
if
that's
it's-
a suggestion.
Yeah, if the body would like
that
that, we could do
I
that.
would have.
Yep.
And then I had a question about the 11.4% matching. How do we come up with like not 11% or 12%? I'm just wondering like how we got that figure.
So that's a standard match that comes from Caltrans on other programs. This funding comes to us through them, and that's typically what they have on other programs.
Okay.
It's an odd number, I recognize
I
that.
was like, who thought of that? All right, thank you.
Thanks. Just for clarifying, you have Mayor Duncan, then Mayor Sanchez, and then I'll come to you, Eric. Mayor Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the work you've done on this, and I certainly understand the need that there needs to be potentially a tremendous amount more of funding, hopefully in the future, given the demand. I appreciate your comments and questions, because I had some similar ones with $4,500,000. I'm not saying I am promoting the concept that we definitely should not I think we should allow any of the applications. I do. But the factors, of course, need to include part of whether they're successful or not with what they have been doing or what indicators they have to prove what they can do. So like when I think about that, because I've been studying all of the ones that have existed in the past. And so if you look at, for instance, like the beach bug, which I thought was very cool and I liked it, but my understanding is it didn't do that well, or it's not currently operational, at least, correct? It's been not operational for quite a while. That's, you know, maybe a factor we could weigh. I mean, if they come back, because I do believe learning from data, if you can fix something, if you can come back. So I think I will support not excluding any prior entities that have had pilots. The question about whether or not to include currently operating ones, you don't want to punish them for being successful, but also with limited amount of funds, you need to weigh whether or not, if they're awarded, we'll have no more pilots anywhere else. So maybe again, instead of excluding them, that could be a factor, but it's a tough thing to do. But anyways, those are my comments. I guess I have one other small one. I don't think it applies to many cities, but if there was a decision by this committee or by the board to exclude cities that have had prior pilots, I would recommend we only do that with ones that have had grants from SANDAG, because I do believe that if a city tries something on their own, gets data, they shouldn't be prohibited from trying to participate in SANDAG funding like the other cities have. So those are my comments. I appreciate your work on it. And I guess my last comment, and I almost hesitate to say this because I don't want it to be taken the wrong way, but given that with this is a federal grant, I certainly am sure, but encourage the staff to continue to look at ensuring that the way that the grant is phrased and things in it don't cause the grant to not be funded by the federal government, given all the changing circumstances that are occurring.
Yeah, we are taking a fresh look at the criteria and language in the call for projects and are going to be making some adjustments based on that.
And last comment, I apologize, is just, I really appreciate hearing the feedback from the working groups about potentially including as a criteria or as a factor, potentially help for the military communities. I think sometimes we forget that a big portion of the service members are in the lowest income brackets in our county when they're analyzed, such as the analysis that was done on housing and whether or not what tier they would be put into, and they were put into the lowest income tier when that analysis was done. Thank you.
Okay, next is Mayor Sanchez.
Thank you very much. This is exciting. I do like that there was that bullet point regarding including all populations have equal representation. So that's geographic kind of a mix, which is something that I'm really pushing for, if you haven't noticed. But no, I am really, really excited about this. And I do really appreciate especially the working group feedback. Thank you.
Mr. LaChapa.
This is tribes are eligible for this grant also because it's federal funding, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And the 11% match that because a lot of tribes are federally funded, not non-gaming tribes, I will say, we run off of grants. So we're still required to pay off the 11% on the match.
I think we can look into it for tribes to
Okay.
watch out for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Mayor Duncan. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to add one other comment for the committee to consider that I failed to mention earlier. I'm not sure if it would be worthwhile or not. I was interested in staff's feedback. If we considered potentially, if we wanted a larger geographic distribution, to make that easier by having the grants only go up to a maximum of $500,000, which is, 1/5 of the full grant funds available, as opposed, or 1/10, as opposed to $1 million. And again, I don't know how, others may feel about that, but that was something I was thinking of in the sense of it may open up 8 grants, at least, as opposed to maybe, 4.5. Thank you.
Yeah, Supervisor Montgomery Step.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for this work, the presentation, really engaging with the working groups, finding out, what what that criteria should be looking like, or at least a start. And, this has always been important to me, the first and last mile connections, and I'm really interested in seeing the data of whether it increases, any type of ridership between choice riders and non-choice riders. So I'm excited about that. Also, just it is also refreshing to hear from all of the different parts of the region, right, that are represented here that have different needs, but you all doing that work of taking in all of that input and making sure that we do the best we possibly can, from, San Ysidro all the way up to Carlsbad and beyond. Oceanside, okay, I won't forget Oceanside, Mayor Sanchez, I won't. In that vein, I also want to mention the Urban Collaborative Project and shout out their Southeast San Diego micro transit pilot project, which this concept was a part of that. So seeing this come to fruition is exciting. As I mentioned with the data, I just want to take a quick note that I want to see what this will mean for our transit operators as well. So MTS and NCTD and certain benefits and opportunities that we have to, based on the last bullet point, have those collaborative efforts. I'm excited to see that. Mayor Duncan mentioned the 4.5 million. I was going to take a little different angle and just ask, has that already been allocated? I know it's coming from the federal government, so we have that in hand.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And yes, as we look at, how to navigate all of the different changes at the federal and state level, as Supervisor Anderson reminds me of, don't leave the state out, that, some of our approaches may need to change, but I think that our mission should stay the same, where we're being fair and giving opportunity for any organization that is capable of doing the work. So I just appreciate that. I want to put that on the record as well. But thank you very much.
Jim, go ahead.
Our communities in our incorporated area, Lakeside, Spring Valley, Pomo, Descanso, Palma Valley, Campo, Julian, Boulevard. I mean, a pretty big list of areas with our 600,000 residents. But we only really have close representation through our planning groups. Yes, we have Supervisor Anderson, Monica, as well as Jim Desmond up in North County, who have a good part of our area, but they have a lot to take care of beyond our communities. I would hope, and it's one of our interests of our Association of Planning Groups, is that our planning groups, become deeply invested with the county and we ask that your agency encourages, if not demands, that the county reaches out to us for feedback and input in developing some of these pilot projects, because I see a lot of great opportunity to help, especially our disadvantaged areas. I think of my community in Spring Valley, we have a pretty high population of disadvantaged folks. We also have what would be considered food deserts, where the shopping centers, food locations where you can go to an Albertsons or something, or some distance away, and trying to schedule and find bus routes that actually work to do that is very difficult. We've had that come to our planning group on numerous occasions. So I'd encourage you to look into that aspect of it. I'm sure that exists in many of the other unincorporated communities as well. So I just ask that you include that in as you move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, and it made me think about something that I wanted to mention too. We're having a microtransit joint working group workshop in May, and the working groups will be invited, including representatives from the county. So at that session, they'll be able to learn from microtransit professionals from all across the nation. We're having a panel on use cases, best practices, and lessons learned for microtransit. So that'll be a good opportunity for them to get involved and get educated as well. Yeah, that's May 8th, 9:30 to 11:30.
You all are invited to participate. You all are invited to participate as well, so we'll get that information out to the group.
Great, thanks. And one question that I had was, I noticed that there was a 10% score assigned to matching funds, but matching funds are required. So is that for matching funds above and beyond the required amount, I assume?
Yes, to try and help stretch that dollar further.
No, a little bit further. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
One other thing that I wanted to mention is that SANDAG has assembled a bench of service providers. So that can also be helpful to any of you who are applying. You don't have to spend your resources on doing a competitive RFP. We set that bench up so that all of you can tap into it directly.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so in general, I think there's been a lot of great comments and I agreed with most of what I heard. I like the items that are on the list that's on the screen, although I do think relative to the concept of actually truly trying to pilot and learn new information about what are issues in new areas, that at least new projects should have a higher score than existing projects, but maybe not necessarily block out existing projects. But I do think it's important that most of these provide new data that allow us to learn new things that will help educate us with respect to what's going to make these types of efforts successful going forward. But those are all the comments I had. Among the additional excellent comments that were had already, this was only a discussion item. I don't see anybody else up. So with that, we've reached the end of our agenda. Our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, April 4th at 1 p.m. Note the time shift to an afternoon meeting again. Also note, as Antoinette started, it's at the new building. So I would recommend people getting there a little bit early as you're trying to familiarize yourself with all of the new items. Where is the new building? Does somebody have an address? 1011 Union Street. 1011 Union Street. What? First floor, and Friday, April 4th at 1 p.m. See you there.
Note the
Thanks.
parking entrance is not on Union Street.
Okay, yeah.
Front Street.
We're adjourned. Thanks. Have a good weekend, everybody.